Hi, everybody. I think we just have a few more people joining us, so we'll give it another minute and we will get started. Hello, everybody. We've got a lot of people joining us tonight. So good evening to everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many people here to learn more about dark skies, a topic that is of particular interest to us in the winter months, although I'm sure many of us are quite appreciative that the nights are growing shorter at the moment. My name is Natasha Hutchison, and I'm the General Manager of the Wester Ross UNESCO Biosphere. And we have put together this program to learn how dark skies can help to support the economy, but also to benefit people and nature. We have a fantastic panel this evening, including Hannah Dalgleish from the University of Oxford, Katrina Waddington from Wild Skies Shetland, Elizabeth Tyndall and Janot McCarthy, who both provide innovative dark sky opportunities in the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere. A bit of housekeeping, we will be recording the webinar this evening, so please ensure that your microphone is switched to mute. And when we hear from our four speakers, during which you can utilize the chat function to ask questions, and we will select as many as we can to present to the panel following the talks. In the chat box, you will find a link to Padlet. If you don't see it, it will be there very soon, which is like a digital board for Post-it notes. And we encourage you all to interact with it during the webinar to share your ideas. Posts will be anonymous, but you will be able to read them in real time, and you can also like or upvote posts to show your support. We will use this information to plan for future events and opportunities that the Wester Ross Biosphere can help deliver. So to kick everything off, I will now hand over to Hannah Dalgleish, who will give us an introduction to dark skies.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm gonna just quickly apologize in advance. There are so many different really interesting topics related to dark sky tourism. I'm gonna try and cover as many of them as possible, but if I go, if there's something that you're more interested in, a particular thing, please don't hesitate to ask me later about it. And yeah, so this has kind of been based on my experience where I've been working at the University of Oxford, kind of networking and learning a lot from people that are interested in these topics, but also kind of starting to do a bit of research as well. And also spent some time in Namibia last year, which was just absolutely incredible, amazing skies there, and the view is completely different as well from the Southern Hemisphere. But I guess I'll get started. And I just will quickly mention that so electric lighting is quite new. We haven't had it for very long. It was invented in the late 1800s, and a lot of different people were involved with sort of its invention and also commercialization. So since then we've come a long way, and now the world is very much lit up, especially in all the cities that you can see here across the world, showing where they have a lot of lighting. And yeah, so this is an image taken from space, and it's kind of lots of images put together over a long time, because also You can't take a picture of the whole Earth at the same time and assume that there won't be clouds as well. So it's kind of been knitted together. But this really goes to show that there is a lot of light coming from the world. And if we want to kind of understand this data a bit better, there have been studies which have kind of made these other maps which kind of make it easier to understand where the concentration of light is and how intense that light is as well. And so there was this study that found that 99% of people living in Europe and North America are living under light polluted skies, and so that is really significant. I think it was about a third of people worldwide live under skies where they cannot see the Milky Way as well, so that is very significant. And people are also trying to understand how light pollution is increasing, and it is. So there's been almost a 50% increase in light emissions between 1992 and 2017. And also it's thought that this is an underestimate because a lot of the newer lighting that we've been using in recent years, LEDs, a lot of that lighting cannot be detected by the current instruments that are in space. So that's just kind of not been included in these studies at all. So it's probably even higher than that. And so when we think about where does this lighting actually come from, a lot of it comes from street lighting, lighting from factories, airports, seaports, facilities, football stadiums, flood lighting, and all sorts of places that it's basically a part of many people's lives. And so, as I mentioned before, LEDs, they've become very mainstream in the past sort of decade or two, and they were thought to be, the kind of savior of lighting because they use so much less energy than the previous lighting that was used. However, we're now discovering that it's not as great as it was thought out to be. These LEDs are often emitting a lot of blue light, which is harmful in many different ways, and it also scatters a lot high into the atmosphere, which is not only bad for nature and for all the things that are alive, but also astronomers that are trying to use these observatories and study the universe as well. And so here's kind of an example of the different light that is emitted, so the different colors that you get from different sources. So for example, you have the daylight spectrum, so that's light coming from the sun, and you get a lot of blue light during the day when you see the sun. And that's all fine because that's how life has evolved with this blue light. However, then when we come to these LEDs at the bottom right, they emit a lot of blue light compared to other lighting like incandescence and fluorescence. So this is why it's such a problem if you're using this kind of blue light at nighttime when nature isn't evolved to be used to that. And LEDs aren't all bad. We have now the ability to make LEDs that are warmer in color and have much less blue emission. It's just getting them in use that's kind of the problem. And so I want to talk a bit more about the impacts of light pollution, and that can be sort of framed under three main themes. So physiological, ecological, and socioeconomic. So as I mentioned before, we've evolved to have a circadian rhythm, so the rhythm of sort of day and night, and that's happened for millions and millions of years for all living things. So since the invention of electric light 100 years ago, things are kind of quite significantly different now for a lot of life on Earth. And so why do we care about that? Well, for example, here we see melatonin, which is a really important hormone that tells us that it's time to go to sleep. So here, for this example, about 9 p.m., you start getting melatonin and your body knows that it's bedtime. And that is due to the sun going down and having a lack of blue light. And this can have all sorts of impacts. And so here are just a few kind of quite depressing examples. But I'll just sort of briefly mention these kind of scary names at the bottom. So there have been studies that show that the blue light has links to depression, obesity, and even cancer as well, all because of this interference with hormones like melatonin. So it is actually quite a serious problem, and also for all other beings as well. So here we can see that actually there's a lot of life that exists during the nighttime. More than 60% of invertebrates and around 30% of vertebrates are considered to be nocturnal, and that's quite a significant amount. And also when you start thinking about some of these, especially nighttime insects, they are some of them are pollinators during the nighttime, and so if they're kind of not pollinating things anymore, that can have a huge detrimental impact on in all sorts of ways. And then there have been endless studies, on dung beetles no longer being able to sort of orientate themselves because they can't see the Milky Way, and interference with bird migration, and the list just goes on and on and on. And so, kind of for obvious reasons as well, the latest IPCC report came out yesterday, kind of showing us that climate change is worse than ever, and that we really need to act. So this could be quite a positive way to think that maybe we could quickly sort of reduce our carbon emissions, because there was this one study that found that, at least in the UK a few years ago, unnecessary lighting amounted to 15 to 30% of their emissions. So actually that is a very significant amount. And if we used our lighting better and sort of reduced the energy that's needed to go to that lighting, we could cut our emissions significantly and save lots of money as well. And so how do we do that? Well, there are lots of different ways. For example, to reduce light pollution, you can make sure that the lighting is being pointed in the direction that you need it and that it's not sort of spilling everywhere into the sky. You can make sure that it's warmer, you can make it dimmer, and you can also make sure that it's only on when it's actually needed. So these are just some initial sort of obvious ways to do it, but there are also other kind of avenues being explored as well. This is a lovely example of New Zealand, where they've sort of completely changed all of their lighting, and it's quite hard to find these before and after photos, so I really do love this one. And this shows that they have replaced all their lighting with LEDs. However, these are kind of a bit warmer than usual, although it could be even warmer still, but it's a good start, and that actually the sky is therefore quite a bit darker than it was before. And New Zealand have also been doing all sorts of amazing work on sort of really promoting dark sky tourism. They have a few dark sky places, and they even think there are plans for New Zealand to become sort of a dark sky country as well. So lots of great work happening there. So that kind of leads me a bit into the talk about tourism. So dark sky tourism is actually kind of a small part of astrotourism, which includes all sorts of things. So I'm not going to talk about space tourism because that's not quite here, but although it is kind of already starting to happen. Then you have things like visits to space centres, people going to watch rocket launches, people just going to visit observatories, doing astrophotography, going to visit sort of historical archaeological sites in astronomy, people that go in chase eclipses, and then people that are doing tourism mainly in dark sky areas. So there's kind of all sorts of things that are related to astronomy, but I'll continue just talking about the dark sky tourism. So as I mentioned, there are sort of these dark sky places, or oases, is kind of the more recent term. And there are three main organisations that are sort of accrediting these. The International Dark Sky Association is probably the most famous one, and they've already accredited more than 130 places. But there's also Canada and Spain as well. They are doing great work equally so. And so by preserving the dark areas, that's really good to make sure that at least the dark skies are kind of kept dark, but there's still a lot of work to be done in places that aren't so dark, and that's starting to happen as well. And so I can't really give a talk anymore without mentioning the Sustainable Development Goals. So these were set up in 2015 by the UN. And the idea is to kind of achieve the targets within these goals by 2030. And so many of these goals kind of overlap with light pollution and dark skies. So as we mentioned before, there's tourism, it creates jobs. And also the other good thing is usually during the winter, that's kind of off-peak time, but that's the best time for stargazing, obviously. So that can kind of help businesses through the winter months. And also you don't necessarily need that much infrastructure to do stargazing. You don't have to have a telescope or a fancy binoculars or anything like that. You could just use the naked eye, even still. And then, as I mentioned before, there's kind of all the environmental benefits. You're not interfering with all the animals and the birds and the bees. And interestingly, it seems like a lot of dark sky tourists are mostly traveling regionally, or sort of domestically, and not going vast distances. So that could sort of help keep tourism a bit more local, perhaps, but that's not clear. And many other reasons as well. And so also social benefits. So a lot of benefits from being outside, being in nature. Studies that show that forest bathing is sort of good for the soul. And not as many studies as I would like to see on being under a dark night sky. A few links to sort of inspiration and awe and how they can increase empathy. But there's still a long way to go in sort of promoting the health and well-being aspects of being under the stars. And then also there's sort of all the educational benefits. A lot of people love astronomy and get inspired to do science or physics as a result of a stargazing experience when they were young. And people do still throughout life enjoy learning about science, learning about astrophysics, or about light pollution and things like that as well. And there have been some great projects that are really focused on sort of training women specifically. So one is called Astro Stays, based in the Himalayas, and they've been training lots of women in rural communities to become sort of dark sky hosts, and it's been a really great successful project, especially for sort of reducing inequalities as well. And then what I love is the cultural aspects too, and sort of every culture has its own stories about the stars, and a lot of the indigenous ones in particular from my time in Africa, we kind of found that some of these stories were already being lost, that they're not being passed on as much as they used to be. So perhaps tourism can be a way to sort of empower communities, to get them to see that this knowledge is worth keeping and sharing, and there's so much to benefit from experiencing that as well as a tourist. So sorry for that very broad and all sorts of different things that are probably talks in themselves, but Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I hope I'm sure the rest of the talks will be great. I look forward to hearing them.
That's great. Thanks very much, Hannah. You certainly were tasked with a huge introduction talk on dark skies. But I think you did a great job kind of outlining some of the social, environmental, and economic aspects of our dark skies. And hopefully the rest of the panelists will have something to contribute to those topics. And so next, we're going to welcome Katrina Waddington from Wild Skies Shetland. And we are just get her presentation up for everybody.
Thanks, Natasha. Natasha's going to share my slides for me. And thank you, Hannah. That was fascinating. And gosh, it's good to be reminded that we're really very lucky to live in, well, I certainly live under dark, unpolluted skies, and we're blessed indeed, aren't we? So just while Natasha's looking, so my name's Katrina Waddington. And as Natasha said, I'm chair of a charity called Wild Skies Shetland. And I'm just going to tell you about the kind of things that we do. And I think my message is really, you know, the sky, you can relate the sky to whatever you want. It's such a rich resource. You can, the sky's about beauty, it's about science, it's about the arts, it's about exercise, it's about fun, all sorts of things. So I'm just going to sort of throw you some examples of what we've been doing. Are you all right with the slides?
I'm nearly there. Yeah, sorry, there's a few presentations open. Okay, here we go.
That's all right.
Sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then we can go straight on to the next one. Okay, so I'm speaking to you from the island of Unst, which is the northernmost part of the UK. So it's about 340 miles from Ullapool to Unst. And just to put that in perspective, from Ullapool to Gretna Green is about 300 miles. So we're further from you in Ullapool than you are to Gretna Green. So we're a long way north, in other words. The island has a population of about 600. It used to be more, but it declined a lot during the noughties when the RAF left and the airport closed. And the island generally has a poor infrastructure for tourism. And what I mean by that is there's not much accommodation, and what accommodation there is generally self-catering. There's a small ferry. It's a very frequent ferry, but it's small. It can only take a small number of vehicles. So that's a hard constraint on how many people can get to the island in the summer. And the other main sort of bit of poor infrastructure is evening food, that there are many evenings when there's no food available. I think the one plus I can say is that a lot of Scotland tourism, a big issue is toilets. At least Unst is good for public toilets. We've got plenty of those. So Wild Skies Shetland was created in 2017 as a charity, and we have 7 trustees. And I think the trustees are kind of crucial to the success we've had because they each bring different skills with them. So we have 2 physics teachers. We have a professional meteorite trader who's based in Unst. We have someone who's an expert in museums and interpretation and heritage. And our treasurer is a very experienced treasurer. So lots and lots of wisdom has been brought to the trusteeship. And originally we started off life called the Northern Lights Visitors Centre. And we've changed that to Wild Skies Shetland. And there are a couple of reasons for that. I think the first one is, you know, we've realized the cost of developing a visitor centre. There's the capital cost and all the difficulties with that and getting the land. And then there's also the running costs of the visitor centre. It's a really big commitment. So we never say never, but at the moment we're sort of doing lots of activities, but with much less capital assets. And the other reasons we moved away from Northern Lights was obviously you can't guarantee to see the Northern Lights, but also it's a relatively short season. And we wanted to actually have something that was year round. And of course, in summer here, it scarcely gets dark at all. And so we had this paradox that at the very time when most visitors are here, it doesn't actually get very dark. And we settled on the idea of Wild Skies Shetland, and I'm really glad we did, actually, because it gives us an excuse to do all sorts of things, as you'll see. And so our aim is to appreciate the skies for all the reasons that Hannah has explained, and that's as much for local folk as for visitors. Both are equally important. And then we hope that appreciation will create income streams and jobs in the island, but that's a kind of a secondary but very important benefit. So the next slide. So I'm just going to show you some of the things that we've done. They're in no particular order, and it's really just to say, you know, skies are an excuse to do all sorts of things. So bottle rockets. Bottle rockets, as you can see, are made from drinks bottles. You can decorate them in any way you want. Adults or children can have fun with that. And then they're launched at speeds that reach up to 100 miles an hour, and they go a good distance and just create lots of fun. And I think it's fairly typical of the kind of things that we do, which sort of combine fun with something a bit more profound. So in this sense, science, and it's the physics teacher that's launching all these bottle rockets. And we had this as an activity during, when there's no COVID, Unst has an annual summer festival called Unstfest. And we did these a couple of years ago as part of Unstfest. The next slide. So this is two more activities from Unstfest. So on the right, you'll see an inflatable planetarium. Many of you have probably seen this before because we hired it from mainland Scotland, and they put on a show, a sort of 3-day show of almost non-stop activity. And it was everything from, you know, kids sort of being taken up to the International Space Station within the planetarium to sort of relaxation sessions with classical music, and it was used for a whole big range of audiences. And then on the left, this is from 2019, when it was 50 years since the Apollo 11 had landed on the moon, and we invited some amateur rocketeers to attempt to launch a replica of the Apollo 11 on the exact anniversary when Apollo 11 was launched. And we like to claim that it's an exact replica, and as you can see, it's rather big. But I think the fact that it's got Unst written in very large letters, and it's also got the Shetland flag, rather sort of shows that it's not an absolutely exact replica, but pretty near that. The next slide. So another thing that we did, and we did this last year when COVID restrictions were in place, was we set up a planet trail. So this was a trail in a really beautiful location on the island, and it's along a sort of underused peat road. So it's relatively easy walking, but it's walking that even a lot of local people have not done it. And what we did was we had one board per planet, and we spaced out those boards the same way that they're spaced out in space. So the same order from the sun and the same relative distances as well. So you'd start at the sun, Earth and Mars would be fairly nearby, and then it was quite, you know, a longer walk to Neptune. And we put a bit of science on each of the boards, and then we asked local people to do the art for each one. So for example, our glassmaker made a lovely dark blue Neptune. The nursery school did a collage of the sun. A local knitter knitted Mercury. And this photo is of a young woman who did a watercolor of Jupiter. We had it last year. We were so pleased with its success. We've taken it down for the winter just because of the wind speeds, but we're going to put it up again next year. And we're going to add guided walks and cake at the end of the walk when you reach Pluto. So we were very pleased with the reception that the Planet Trail got. The next one. So last year in June, there was a partial eclipse of the sun. And within the UK, Unst, because it's the furthest north, was the best place to see it. So Wild Skies Shetland made and sold an eclipse pack. It was nothing sort of very fancy. It had in the special glasses that you use so that you don't damage your eyes. It had a page about the history. We found an old article about the previous time that there'd been an eclipse. It had some science explaining eclipses. It had a recipe about how you can recreate solar eclipses with pizzas and bits of tomato to show how the sun moves. It had some coloring in, so it was just generally a fun pack. And through social media, that was kind of picked up, and we were actually interviewed live on BBC Breakfast. So this is a picture of us showing the pinhole box camera that we used, and it was in fact very effective. The local school had a few of them and used it. And as you can see, it was a lovely sunny day, not in which to enjoy the eclipse. We did actually see it a few hours later, but we were supposed on BBC Breakfast to be showing the eclipse, but it was pure cloud at that point. The next slide. Now, there really is an asteroid called Unst, and this was organized by one of our trustees. So it's quite a complicated process to get the official naming of an asteroid, but one of our trustees kind of kindly went through the process. So we have Unst, the asteroid, orbiting beyond Mars in the asteroid belt. And we were so pleased by this that we've actually made a short little 10-minute film about it, which we show on all sorts of occasions. So it used local actors. We had a professional filmmaker, but everybody else involved in the film was a local person, and we just had a lot of fun making it. And I think there's a certain kudos for being an island with an asteroid. The next slide. So we got sponsorship for a theatre group to come. And it was a one-man show, and he did something about being an astronaut called Space Ape Children's Theatre. Again, very, very enjoyable. And, you know, we got sponsorship by showing how closely it was linked to an understanding of the skies. Next slide. Last year we had an exhibition at our local heritage centre. So we invited submissions from local Shetland photographers and were donated sufficient number of photos. And it was shown over last summer at the Heritage Centre. And again, you know, you can go to the exhibition and just admire the beauty of it, or you can sort of look at it in perhaps a more technical light. And even in this picture, you can see a comet, another galaxy, a satellite, the effect of light pollution. So there's all sorts of ways of looking at these photos. The next slide. So what we're busy doing this year is setting up a sky trail, and that's kind of going to be Wild Skies Shetlands. It's the jewel in our crown, I think. And it will have 13 stops. And basically the trail goes around beautiful places in Unst. And so it takes you on a lovely tour of Unst anyway, but each stop features a different sky-related topic. So it might be the night skies, storms, the effect of the moon on tides, because we've got a tidal energy barrier here. Dialect sayings, stories, poems, all sorts of different things featured, one at each different stop. We've got VR headsets at one of the stops showing you footage of the Northern Lights. We've got talking benches that play you music and speak to you in the Shetland dialect. So all sorts of things. It'll be completed this year. We're pretty near completion. And that will sort of become our main asset, because we can have events based around any one of those 13 stops. You know, we can take people around the whole thing. We can do mini tours around some of them, just all sorts of things. So we're very excited by that. The next slide. So this is just an example of the artwork from the trail. So this is Muckleflugger, the very northernmost building in the UK. And we were lucky to get funding for a professional interpretation company to design the Sky Trail materials. So, you know, we think it's very sort of professionally done and beautifully done. And it was interesting hearing Hannah talking about the different cultural interpretations, because one of our sky stops is based, we have a replica Viking longhouse and Viking longship on the island, and the sky stop there is about the Viking interpretation of the stars and the different stories that they saw. And then the last slide. So that's what we do in Wild Skies Shetland. We love the skies. We appreciate the skies. I think over the years we've brought about £100,000 worth of investment to the island. We've been very reliant on grants so far, and we hope to translate that into a more sustainable income stream. But I think the main point is that we have lots of fun doing it, and fun just finding the linkages that can be made with the skies.
That's really great. Thank you, Katrina. It was really interesting to hear about not only looking up in the winter for our dark skies, but finding year-round dark sky, or looking up activities, educational activities for our communities and also for visitors, and to connect everyone by looking up. And thank you for that. I think there's a lot of great ideas in there. And I would also encourage everyone, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or if any idea inspires you, please put it on the Padlet. But the link is in the chat for that. And without hesitation, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Tyndall, who is a freelance dark sky ranger. Hello, Elizabeth, down in the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere. And she's going to tell us about some of the work that she does down there.
Thank you for that. And I mean, those have been great talks so far. It's been really interesting just for me to listen to those. So I'm going to do my own PowerPoint, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So yes, I'm Elizabeth Tyndall, and I'm a freelance ranger first and foremost. And part of what I do is the darks as a biosphere dark sky ranger. Now, just as I was becoming a freelance ranger, the Biosphere and the Galloway Forest Dark Sky Park decided that they wanted dark sky rangers. It was still a freelance post, so they didn't have money with it, but we did have to go to interviews. And what they wanted specifically were people that could communicate more than people that were astronomers. And they spent quite a long time training us, and we spent a long time training ourselves with reading books and reading things. So I've been doing things like learning some of the myths that don't just come from Greece, but come from other places as well. And of course, learning how to spot the constellations and spot the stars. So because I became a Biosphere Dark Sky Ranger, I decided that I would have my ranger badge and I would add some stars to it. So just to kind of make the linkages in there, because I do a lot of other things apart from stargazing, but it's one of the ones that really catches on and people really like that thing. So I worked with the Scottish Countryside Rangers Association to make sure that they didn't mind, one, me being a freelance ranger, two, using the badge that all other rangers use, and just making sure that I've been working with them for the future for other freelance and independent rangers, that there's a kind of quality assurance with that. So the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere, I mean, biospheres are great places and I love my biosphere. I've got a certification mark from them, and that's because I have a very environmental and sustainable policies within my business. So when I need something, it's quite often the charity shop that I go to, or I go to a car boot sale and get things there. So it's just a different way of doing it. So this is our biosphere. We're right down in the south, so you've just come from the top tip of Scotland, and we're right down in the south, and we've got the southernmost tip in Scotland down there at Dromore with the Mull of Galloway. And our biosphere is this kind of central area, and it covers a lot of Dumfries and Galloway, but it also goes up into Southern Ayrshire too. So it's got this area in the middle that you can see there, that's the kind of core area for it. And that happens to correspond with the Dark Sky Park pretty much. It's an area that doesn't really have very many buildings, doesn't really have very many populations or anything in it. The only village that's in there is a place called Glentrool. And it was the very first place around here to get those downward facing LED lights. And you can see stars just from the center of that. So if we're looking at a satellite image, this would be one of the places that you wouldn't see those lights and so on. I often use a satellite image just to show that kind of southern part of Scotland, basically we disappear. It doesn't look as though there's any land there because there are so few kind of big towns and things. So Galloway Forest Park, we were the first dark sky park in Europe. And we've been working away on it to make it the best. And so the council has been keeping going with that kind of good lighting. I realise that the blue lighting isn't as good, so we need to be looking at peachy lighting and things like that. But the fact that it's downward facing and that there's work being done at kind of council level is really good from that point of view, and for me to be able to see stars. So when I do stargazing, and that's the main thing I do, quite often I don't consider it as stargazing. I have darkness and stars experiences because we know that we'll have the darkness, but we don't always know that we're going to have stars. It's not always like this kind of night here. So I work a lot with texture, so that when I go and find a site that I want to actually do some dark skies activities at, I'm looking for things that maybe feel different underfoot, so that you've got some tarmac road and then you've got some forestry road and then maybe a little path, that some of it's through where you've got trees close to you, some of it's where you've got big open areas, you've got different sounds of the wind in the trees, you've got things like rivers and burns, so that I'm looking for something that is more than just stars. So it's something that if it's cloudy and we can't see the stars, then we have something else to do. So one of the things that I provide are things like this campfire. So, I mean, this is me lighting it on this occasion, but very often it's my visitors, the people that are out with me, that are lighting the campfires themselves. So when I'm looking for places, I'm looking for places that are safe to have campfires. I'm looking for things like having parking, having toilets. Toilets are always a good thing, especially in the middle of the night. I want it to be low light, of course, so that it's one of the darkest places, because I do naked eye stargazing, so I'm not using things like telescopes and so on. I want it to have somewhere that has maybe a little kind of walk that we can go on in the dark with the head torches, that I can, I can use it as a place to tell other stories as well as the star stories. So the people that come out on my activities, this was a couple who, this was their honeymoon, and they decided that they wanted to go stargazing. But to be perfectly honest, the guy here was actually more excited by the fire than he was actually about the stars. And we saw a moon. I made it as romantic as possible. You can see them cuddled up under a blanket there. And he spent most of the night actually feeding this fire. And he was keeping saying, they never let me do this kind of stuff at school. So they wouldn't let him out on expeditions and activities that the school were doing. So he just wanted a campfire. So this was his big thing. And I have a pair of binoculars that I bring out that are larger astro binoculars. And once they came out, he was practically dancing around the field, having a look at all the different stars that were there, and not giving his new bride really a chance to do it. So I do a lot of kind of high-end stargazing. This is a luxury hotel that they were staying in, special for their honeymoon. So it's a special occasion. And I get a lot of people from birthdays, anniversaries, just people wanting really to do something pretty much different and unique. I also work with other groups. So I work a lot with community groups and businesses, so that we are doing things where it's group stargazing, family stargazing. I work with accommodation providers, lots of other different people. So again, it's just trying to make it different and unique, and something that they will enjoy no matter what, really, the weather. It is a bit of a problem when it's snowing, but I have had comments that who knew that we could have such a good time when it was snowing and it was cold. and that, I mean, occasionally the skies would just open and there'd be stars there, and that made their day. But the campfire cooking keeps people warm. We provide a nice drink and such things as well. So it's those kinds of extras really that I maybe have an advantage, that I can do these kinds of things, have those little kind of touches and those nuances. And sometimes it is about quality or quantity. It's not that I can't take 50 people stargazing, but taking 50 people stargazing, can everybody hear me? Is everybody happy? Are they getting to ask their questions and so on? So it tends to be much more bespoke and tailored work that I do. And I mean, it's just wonderful. I was a bit of a night owl before this all started. And I have to say that not getting to bed until 3 o'clock in the morning takes a little bit of getting used to, but it is really good to be able to do that kind of thing. And when you see smiles like this on people's faces, it's just really, really rewarding. And I like being out in the dark. I like that kind of velvety feel of the darkness. I love when we can see the stars. But we shouldn't be put off when the moon's there either. The moon is an amazing asset as well, because it does have that kind of, it's a different texture. Just seeing it come out, poking out from between the clouds, that can be a really good thing for someone, especially someone who comes from the middle of a city like London or Birmingham. Liverpool, I get people from as well, so that they haven't been out in the dark. And if you get your timings right for things like that, I took one couple that had come from Liverpool. They got out of the car and just went, whoa, it's dark, because they'd never been in that kind of darkness. We walked, we got our eyes used to where we were going. We went off so that we went to look at some artworks. We had our campfire. And as we were sitting at our campfire, I timed it so that the moon would rise. And when they were going back, they were just thinking that this was like being in daylight. And it gave them that full experience of darkness and light that you can get with being out in a night. So sometimes it's just, again, those kinds of things where I find out the kinds of things people want from their visit and try and make sure that they get those kinds of things, be it putting a kettle on the campfire and having a nice cup of tea, warming them up. And I usually say that my experiences last between 2 and 3 hours. And in part, that's so that I don't put people off coming out. I don't want to think that they have to be out for the full night to be there. But I find that if it's a really crystal clear night, it gets so cold. It's beautiful for the stars, but it's not so good for keeping warm. And especially if people have come on holiday and decided they want to go stargazing once they're on holiday, they may not have all the layers and so on that they need to keep themselves really warm. And again, that's why hot drinks, snacks, doing a bit of cooking on the fire, having the fire itself, all helps with those kinds of things. So I have various venues that I choose because I like the different things on those venues. And I give people suggestions as to which one might suit them depending on where they're staying. Sometimes I even go to where they're staying. We can actually do the stargazing at that site, and that reduces the carbon footprint. We're not both going out into the dark in our cars. And also, if you do come from somewhere at Liverpool, you may never have really driven on a twisty, windy road in the dark before. So it's safer for the wildlife and safer for the people too. And I have to say, some of the wildlife I see on the way home is amazing as well. Lots of badgers, hedgehogs, the occasional otter and such things. So I don't just do dark skies. So I do dark skies mostly during the kind of winter and those shoulder months. I do some in the summer, but I also do a lot of work in the summer, in the daylight, and trying to connect those two things together is really good. So I do things like pond dipping for public gardens. I've got lots of hammocks now, and I do some hammocks because it's just so nice and relaxing. I'm part of a group, the Outdoor and Woodland Learning group, here in Dumfries and Galloway, and we're doing something called branching out, which is for people with mental ill health and getting them to come out into the countryside and enjoy being out. Occasionally, groups, youth groups and so on want to come out into the dark as well, but there's lots of things that we can do during the daylight. And I've adapted a few of the things I'm doing so that I can do kind of more star space orientated things. So this is my version of the Rocket Lab. It's not probably quite 100 miles an hour that we're sending things up into the sky, but we have on the top left-hand corner, we have what I call straw rockets. So this is people power, where you just breathe into a straw and you blast another straw up into the air so that you can just enjoy doing something that is really simple. It's a recycling activity, and it's something that you can do at home. Then down on the left-hand side is what I call a popping rocket, and that's a film canister full of vinegar and bicarbonate of soda. And one of the great things is actually just the anticipation of waiting for those to set off. But again, we can add lots and lots of science in there. So it's not just about the myths and the stories, it's about the science as well. And all of this can be combined. I even do after dark rocket launches too, but they tend to be of the bigger kind of bottle rockets that we have here, where I'm just using air pressure that's provided by the children. And I have to say adults love this one as well, but it is just really great on a nice kind of summer's day. You can get wet and you can get mucky and just really, really enjoy yourself. So I have some inside things I do as well, because believe it or not, down here in Galloway, it's not always the best of weather. So we do some other science things where we're using unnatural sunlight. You can do this with sunlight as well, where we can do some prints using the shadows and using the sunlight hitting paper that will do this. We do things like making up your own constellation and your own telescope. So all of these different kinds of things, I'm bringing kind of darkness into the daytime, as well as doing my normal kind of ranger type activities. And a great deal of what I do tends to be kind of networking, things like this, which is just brilliant to meet so many people from different areas. I've talked to the Wild Skies Shetland, and we've explored some of the things, the thoughts that they had there about what they're going to do and how we can incorporate kind of dark skies ideas and things into it. I've just today been working with the South of Scotland Destination Alliance about a possible dark sky trail that they are going to be doing. So networking is great, sharing ideas is great, and I'm happy to answer any questions people have. Just do different things. And the next speaker just lives around the corner from me, and I was speaking to her this morning, and she has an absolutely amazing place that she's going to be telling you a little bit more about in just a minute.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think you pulled out so many good points. And again, as in Shetland, dark skies are not just about seeing stars. There's lots of things we can do and experience when the skies aren't dark. And I particularly like the notion of texture, because I do feel like once your vision senses are cut off, you become much more aware of feelings and sounds around you. It's a really fantastic.
I have to say that's one of the things that I was exploring, the picture that was there. It was we were talking about forest bathing and whether there was a possibility for something like star bathing, where rather than me talking and telling the stories and so on, Isabel and I were kind of thinking that it could be that we're not doing quite so much of the talking and a lot more about that experiential world.
Yeah, it's given us, I think, a lot to think about, and I've seen a lot of questions come up in the chat. So we will get to as many of them as possible. I realize we are close to 8 o'clock, but we will leave the questions open for 15-20 minutes after the presentations, because I think there's a lot for us to learn. And I do have the pleasure of finally introducing Jeannot McCarthy from Cora Wall's Dark Sky Glamping, also down the Galloway in Southern Ayrshire. And I'm just going to get her presentation up for everybody.
Hello, everyone. So.
To know if you just want to give a quick introduction. I'm just.
Oh, okay. Yes. Hello. My name is Jeannot McCarthy, and I am in the Galloway Forest Park in Dark Sky Park. And we've started, my husband and I have started a glamping business. So, yes. So we're part of dark, we're right by the biosphere. And could you go to the next slide? This is our location, and we're just at the foot of Cairnsmore and the Palnure Burn. What we did originally is a pop-up to see what the interest would be in rural accommodation, what the people would want. We started on Airbnb, and one of the things that attracted most of our visitors was the location, and that it was in Dark Sky Park. So if you could go to the next slide. This was a quote that I loved. "It is a beautiful and delightful sight to behold the body of the moon," from Galileo. Next slide. So I thought of interest for you would be the Dark Sky visitor profile. What we've found is most of our guests are within 2 to 3 hours a journey that come here. A lot of people from Glasgow, from Edinburgh, from big cities in England. The demographic of what we have seems to be late 20s, 40s, early 50s. What was interesting was that all our guests are first-time Galloway visitors, and they absolutely were so surprised and loved the location to be in Dark Sky Park and also exploring the Galloway Forest Park. The interests of our guests, they've been adventure seekers. We had so many researchers and scientists, a lot of them being in labs all the time. So to be out in the fresh air, walking, doing a lot of wild swimming, just unplugging and just enjoying the night skies. We had photographers. We are about 200 meters from the Carritree mountain biking trail. So instead of the ski in, ski out, we can do bike in, bike out. Because there also is not a lot of rural accommodation close to the bike trails. We have a lot of dark sky enthusiasts that have come and stayed with us. And then the other thing is I found a whole lot of graduate students that would come from Edinburgh that were studying environmental studies and things like that. Also, the thing that I found, our guests so enjoyed and were so enchanted with the area that they recommended to their friends to come. So we had a lot of their friends come and book with us. And now we're starting to see a lot of guests rebooking. We have our first guest that's rebooking arriving in about a week. So next slide, please. These are just some comments on it. I have a little Instagram account for Corwar Dark Sky Glamping, and we're just letting it do organically. These are just some of the little posts that people would put in about being at our place. So have a little look. So next slide, please. What we've done, our vision here at Corwar, it's all about sustainability, and we don't want a lot of accommodations. We want it to be very special. What we're doing, for example, we found some old 1950s railway carts that we're converting into shepherd huts. We have, as a pop-up, we had a vintage caravan that we used just to get a feel, to see if we would like having guests and to see if the guests would like being here. You know, it was just a learning experience and it's been amazing. We have a cabin that's all repurposed wood. It's just amazing, all the little details. And then also we're doing a converted bothy for families where it'll be more bunk beds and things like that, but all recycled materials and just a lot of detail and heart going into it. Next slide, please. What we did with the Galloway and Southern.
Where today has gone. How is it 3 p.m. already?
Oh, and should I go on?
When are you recording your roadshow?
Tomorrow morning, but I haven't written.
Oh, I think it's on. Somebody's not muted. Hello?
We're okay now. Thanks, Chanel.
Oh, okay. So anyway, what we've done is we've decided to follow the ethos of the biosphere in building our glamping accommodations. So next slide, please. By the way, this is the photograph on this slide is from one of our guests, Drew Forsyth, which I love his work. So anyway, let's see here. I can't really see that. I used the quote from Eileen MacLeod, the climate change minister, as to follow the ethos that I would like to do. No single organization, business or community will be able, I can't read what it says right there because of my name, tackle climate change in isolation. So next slide, please. What we're doing to help, I know it's going a little bit off. You guys are more interested in dark sky, but I'm just trying to show as a business, a small business, what I'm trying to do here following the ethos and everything. So we support and contribute to the protection, enhancement, restoration of habitats, species, sustainability use, and enhanced natural resources of the biosphere, including biodiversity and scenic appeal. So next slide, and then I'll give you some examples. For example, we're creating, I'll explain. For the, because we have guest accommodations, in case of fires, you need to have a water source with 40,000 gallons of water available. The problem is we're not with mains water, and we're on our property. We have the Palnure burn, but it's too far away. So we would have needed to get a huge tank to hold all that water. But thinking about the biosphere and the ethos, we came up with the idea to create a freshwater pond, which would attract wildlife, birds, and improve the landscape to make it look beautiful. We're planting native broadleaf trees. And the other thing that we're doing is we're growing and creating natural fencing using living willow trees. So next slide, please. Okay, to support the economy and to benefit people and nature, we're collaborating with other businesses in the wider community to support a healthy economy while pursuing good practices of social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Next slide, Pete, please, and I'll give you some examples. So in the middle picture there, you'll see we have a rare breed sheep called Castle Milk Morit, which happened to be from Dumfriesshire. So what we've done is we're collaborating with a new business. It's a craft business, and she's called, her company's called the Belted Galloway. What we did is she asked us for, when we shear the sheep, to have the wool. So we happily gave her all the wool. Then she in turn made felted rugs with the wool, which she sells to different shops or goes to different fairs. And she's made us some rugs, which we're putting in our accommodations, and we'll be sure to have little stories of her company, and maybe perhaps some guests would be interested in buying some of her products. Because we're close to the bike trails, we work a lot with the Brake Pad, which is at the Carritree Visitor Center, and we promote their mountain bike rental and sales to our guests. And they in turn help us because there's a lot of mountain bikers that come from all over and not a lot of accommodation available. I mean, there is more and more, but we're just right here, just right here, 200 meters away from one of the better bike trails. So next, please. The other thing we're doing, again, with sustainability in mind, our outdoor furniture, we're working with a company called We Dram Barrel Creations. So they're local. They reuse old whiskey barrels and make absolutely beautiful outdoor furniture. So that's something else we do. That's my husband in the middle picture in one of the cabins. We've used a Shennington sawmill, which again is local. The timber that we've used, a lot of it is felled timber that's, for example, you know, there's been some rot in the woods and they've fallen. So we use that wood and just local larch and whatnot. So that's that. And then we also have supported all of our local plumbers, electricians, and things like that. Next slide, please. We also try to promote cultural heritage and local products. Next slide, please. I'll give you examples. What we plan to do here at Corrowarren, we've done a lot of foraging, and we are planning to do foraging workshops. Also, we are promoting local artists, photographers to our guests. Again, you'll see at the bottom middle picture, Drew Forsyth has wonderful pictures of our property in red with the infrared lamps. There's a Newton Stewart Traditional Music and Dance Festival. We will be offering very discounted rates to the musicians that participate. Next slide, please. We were asked by Sanctuary Sound and Light Festival in the Galloway Forest Park if they could use our accommodations for their artists. Again, we will give very discounted rates and support them in any way we can. We promote to our guests all the local heritage sites throughout the region. Next slide, please. Contributing to the health and well-being of the community. We offer our guests the chance to really unplug and reconnect with nature, friends, and family. We don't have Wi-Fi service here, so I always let our guests know, download music, bring a good book, maybe download a movie, but use it as your chance to just unwind and just get in one with nature. Next page, please. So yeah, so these are some of the activities people are doing for their mental health, well-being, and enjoyment, which is mountain biking, wild swimming, walking, being out by the campfire, cooking, gazing out at the stars, and just reconnecting, chatting, talking to people, no internet, nothing like that. Next page, please. Stargazing, bird watching, and whatnot. And there's my dog on the top right, who loves to go on walks with the guests. Seems to be no problem. And next page, please. We also have built some owl boxes. There's a gentleman, Mr. Tom Greenaway, that does all the tagging for the barn owls. So what we've done here on the property is we've built some owl boxes, and are happy to have him here and happy to contribute somehow, some way to the biosphere and to the animals. Next page, please. Well, next page. What we do is help raise awareness for the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere. We give all our guest brochures about the GSA Biosphere, the Dark Sky Park. We have our employees, they're aware of our ethos and always work in a sustainable way. Only green cleaning products will be used to protect the ecosystem. And we would like very much to invite GSA Biosphere staff to give presentations to guests and workshops. And on that note, it was wonderful to meet Elizabeth today. She came and saw the property, and we've come to some very good ideas. She was wonderful, and I hope to offer her services to our guests. Next page, please. And that's it. Thank you very much. And these are some pictures of Corwar. And that's it. Thank you. I enjoyed the talk, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jano. And if there's one thing we can claim credit, it's making a connection in Galloway and Southern Ayrshire from Wester Ross. So thank you for that. I'm glad that you were able to find each other, and I hope that you know, there will be inspiration from not only, you know, your talk, but all the talks this evening of possible ideas and avenues to explore. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Sarah, who has been looking at some of the questions in the chat, and she is going to select as many as possible. We'll go for 15 minutes until 8:30 if time allows for everybody to answer some of these questions. And Sarah, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Natasha. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all your questions and comments. It's been really interesting to read. So firstly, I just have a couple of questions about technology. And firstly to Hannah, there was a question, how do you effectively engage public bodies and authorities and planners to help tackle light pollution and protect our dark skies? Most of the public buildings in our area are floodlit all night, while planners insist on street lights for most new developments. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a solution or a clear answer. But there are many organizations that are trying to figure out the best ways to really, you know, communicate to local councils, to developments, to all sorts, to share the information about, you know, the detrimental impacts of light pollution. I'm going to be moving to Northern Ireland next month, where I'll be working with a local council there. And hopefully that will kind of give me some direct insights of what is actually needed to make these changes happen. But yeah, I would say you can sort of do the usual things like write to your MPs and I don't know, maybe we need to try and do a petition, whether or not that actually changes anything. But yeah, there is information out there on advice on how to approach different bodies. So I'll have a look and maybe try and share some links. But yeah, it's a really important question, and in the UK we're behind on this and need to be better at changing and communicating on these issues.
Brilliant, thank you. There was also a question for you about the LED light pollution not being able to be seen from space. So there was a question about whether, you know, if there's any sort of technology coming in the future to be able to see this or count this.
Yeah, as far as I know, there aren't any immediate plans to put something in space, because either, yeah, there's not been the right people at the right time kind of working on this, but I'm going to a meeting in a few weeks' time where I think that will be a part of the conversation that happens, to kind of see like, what can we do? How can we get something in space that can measure it? There are currently astronauts who, they can just take a photo with their camera. And so there have been some citizen science projects where it's like, here's all the photos taken by astronauts at the nighttime. Can you figure out where it is and which city it is? And it's not as easy as it looks. So there is that's a very difficult way of measuring light pollution. So it would be good to have a specific instrument, but as far as I know, that's not happening yet, but hopefully in the future it will.
Thanks so much. Okay, so next I've got a question for Katrina and Elizabeth. Do you use, or have you thought to in near future to incorporate immersive technologies like augmented reality or VR, for example, in your activities? I know that, Katrina, I think you mentioned about VR in your activities, but be interesting to hear from Elizabeth as well.
Shall I maybe let you go first?
Yes, so what we've got 4 VR headsets which have various, mostly Northern Lights footage on them, and they're really, they're just another experience. So they're obviously held indoors. In the summertime they'll be held in the Heritage Centre, and in the wintertime in the Leisure Centre, because that's the most staffed winter building. And they're just another way of exposing people to what might be seen, and we focused on the Northern Lights because, a lot of people just come for one night and their chances of seeing a good display are very small, and B, we all know in reality that what you see on film is sometimes a bit better than what you see in real life. So that's our one use. We're not planning any other uses. We were inspired to do that because actually the people who brought up the inflatable planetarium had some VR headsets about walking in space and all sorts of things, and we saw how engaged people were with it and how enthusiastic. So that's why we've incorporated it into the Sky Trail.
So from my point of view, when I go out stargazing, I do actually take a couple of tablets with me so that people can use the apps on those. So they can look at something like Stellarium, and if they're wanting to find a particular constellation or something, it's quite nice from a learning point of view for them to star hop themselves and actually be able to find that themselves. I mean, I would quite like to use VR, but it depends really on just how you can fit that in, and whether the car boot sales around me have VR headsets and some spare mobile phones and so on that I can get. But it's very much the kind of thing that I want people to experience where they are and do the kinds of things of being out there in the cold, experiencing it as it is, but possibly going back and researching and looking into things more rather than standing in the middle of a field with a VR headset on. I did think about it quite seriously at one point of doing something like that, but it's not something I feel that quite goes with what I'm doing right at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yes, Phil, there was a couple of questions specifically for some of our presenters tonight in chat. So yes, I see you should always replying there in the chat. So that's great. So next I had a question for Katrina about light pollution. And so have you included any light pollution aspects like awareness to your events?
Not really, not explicitly. I suppose, it's kind of implicit in what we do that, look, this is a dark place. I think the one time where we've mentioned it explicitly was that picture I showed you that was shown in the exhibition, and we do talk about light pollution there and the effects that it has. But you know, we're an entirely volunteer organization, and so, for example, we're not applying for dark skies accreditation, not because we don't think it's important, but because we're just too small to do that, and we're kind of hoping that Shetland Council or some bigger organization might pick that up at some point. So we don't explicitly mention it, but that's not, you know, not because it's not important, but we're a sort of quite a sort of lightsome, making fun things, and I think in a way we sort of take it for granted that people will believe that Unst has dark skies.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Katrina. And there was also a question for you about what the best way to contact you is for any information. And yeah, sorry, go on.
Was that from Megan? If it's from Megan, I've replied separately, but we have a website, wildskiesshetland.com, and we have an email address, wildskiesshetland@gmail.com. So anybody's welcome to get in touch, please do. Wild
Brilliant.
Skies Shetland, so double S in the middle, Skies Shetland.
Thank you. And there was also a question about whether your ideas would be available to be shared on the mainland and replicated possibly.
I saw that question from Toby, and I was sort of laughing because, Toby, we in Unst there's actually also a spaceport which actually just got its planning permission yesterday. And I think in the world of space sports, Sutherland and Unst are bitter rivals. But I think in the world of community tourism and sky tourism, we shouldn't be rivals at all. So yeah, we're always happy to chat to people. I think you asked particularly about the Planet Trail. That's actually quite a common idea. A friend of mine just sent me some pictures from a Yorkshire Planet Trail. We're certainly happy to tell you how we did ours. But I think that the key to the Planet Trail in a way was involving local folk and asking them to do the artwork and things. So there's no quick fixes, but you know, absolutely. And it would be really interesting to talk to Toby, because we are in this interesting situation where we have spaceports developing alongside our dark skies.
Brilliant, thank you. And I actually had a question for Jeannot, if that's okay. So I was wondering what benefits you think being associated with the biosphere offers to your business.
Well, I think that so many. For me, it was a blueprint of what I wanted to do. And I think people are so much more aware of the environment and nature and everything that we have to offer here. It just, it's just been incredibly helpful. I'm sorry I can't answer it any better than that, but yes.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Brilliant. I just had a final question for Elizabeth as well. There was a question, what's the biggest misconception that you have had from your visitors about the experience you share with them?
The misconception about what I'm actually going to be doing is that middle of July, taking a 3-year-old out into the dark is a good plan. And I do get quite a few questions about going out in the summer and with young children in tow. And of course, it's not even going to get dark until after midnight. So I think that's one of the things that people fail to remember, that it doesn't get dark at the same time every day, and that it doesn't get dark, that they don't know that it doesn't get dark in the summer in the same way that it would do in the winter. I mean, from a space and stars thing, it is just that whole thing of the difference between a planet and a star is something that, I mean, I'm working sometimes with people who haven't got that level of knowledge. but it's great because I mean it means that I have lots that I can tell them and lots that they can learn from that point of view. But yes, it is that when's darkness point of view. It's rather like I work on beaches as well, and of course the tide is sometimes in and sometimes out.
Fantastic. Thank you to our speakers, Hannah, Katrina, Elizabeth, and Jano, and especially to all of you for sharing your time with us this evening, especially considering we went over a bit, but I'm sure that we all learned quite a lot, and you may have more questions or suggestions after we sign off here. So we have recorded the webinar and we'll make it available in the coming days. Keep an eye out on our website and on our Facebook page and other social media to let you know when that's posted. And the Padlet will remain open, and we'll put the Padlet details along with the video. So if you do have any ideas or suggestions or any feedback, we'd be very, very happy to receive that. So thank you once again to all of our speakers and to you for joining us, and we shall see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.